The rain hammered against the windows of the small apartment in Queens, New York, creating rivers that distorted the city lights below. Marcus Chen sat at his cluttered desk, surrounded by towers of medical textbooks and empty coffee cups, the blue glow of his laptop screen illuminating his exhausted face. At 28, he looked older, dark circles under his eyes telling the story of countless sleepless nights spent studying for his medical boards while working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Marcus! The sharp voice cut through his concentration like a knife. Marcus, are you even listening to me? He looked up to see his sister, Captain Sarah Chen, standing in his doorway in her crisp army dress uniform. Even in the dim light of his cramped studio apartment, her medals gleamed. She was everything their parents had wanted: successful, respected, climbing the ranks with impressive speed. At 31, she commanded a company at Fort Hamilton and never let him forget it. Sorry, Sarah. I was just studying. Right. Like that's gotten you anywhere. She stepped into the room, her nose wrinkling at the mess. God, how do you live like this? When was the last time you cleaned? Marcus closed his textbook slowly, trying to keep his temper in check. I've been busy. Some of us have to work for a living while going to school. Sarah's laugh was cold. Work? You call tutoring high school kids and stocking shelves at a pharmacy work? Marcus, you're 28 years old. When are you going to grow up and do something real with your life? Medical school is real. Sarah, you've been almost getting into medical school for 3 years now. She picked up one of his rejection letters from Columbia, examining it with theatrical disappointment. Face it, little brother. You're going nowhere. You're a nobody, and you always will be. The words hit him like physical blows, each one carefully aimed at his deepest insecurities. Marcus stood up, his hands clenched at his sides. Why are you here, Sarah? Just to remind me what a disappointment I am? I'm here because Mom asked me to check on you. She's worried. Sarah straightened her uniform, brushing away an invisible speck of dust. The family reunion is next month. Try not to embarrass us too much. Maybe don't mention the medical school rejections this time. I got waitlisted at Mount Sinai. Waitlisted isn't accepted, Marcus. It's just another way of saying no. She headed for the door, then paused, turning back with what might have been pity in her eyes. Look, I know you mean well, but maybe it's time to be realistic. Not everyone is meant for greatness. Some people are just ordinary. There's no shame in accepting what you are. The door closed behind her with a decisive click, leaving Marcus alone with the echo of her words. Nobody. Ordinary. Going nowhere. He sank back into his chair, staring at the anatomy textbook before him. The human heart stared back, mapped out in precise detail. He knew every ventricle, every valve, every possible pathology. But knowing wasn't enough. It was never enough. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor at the pharmacy. Need you to cover overnight shift tomorrow. Johnson called out sick. Marcus typed back a quick confirmation. The overnight shifts paid time and a half, and he needed every penny for next year's application fees. He'd apply again. He had to. Because despite what Sarah said, despite what everyone thought, he knew he was meant for something more than stocking shelves and living in the shadow of his perfect sister. The next evening, Marcus dragged himself into Walgreens at 10 p.m., the fluorescent lights harsh after the dimness of his apartment. The store was mostly empty, just a few late-night customers wandering the aisles. He nodded to Patricia, the evening shift supervisor, as she gathered her things. Quiet night so far, she said. Though we did have some guy come in earlier acting strange. Kept asking about medical supplies, wouldn't say what for. Security walked him out. Marcus frowned. What kind of medical supplies? Bandages, antiseptic, surgical tape, lots of it. Jerry thought he might be one of those doomsday prepper types. Patricia shrugged. Anyway, he's gone now. You should have a peaceful night. But peaceful was the last thing the night would be. Around 2 a.m., Marcus was restocking the pharmacy shelves when he heard the automatic doors whoosh open. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. He peered around the corner and felt his blood run cold. 3 men in tactical gear moved through the store like shadows, weapons drawn. This wasn't a robbery. It was something else, something worse. Marcus ducked back behind the pharmacy counter, his heart hammering. He needed to call 911, but his phone was in the break room. Clear, one of the men called out in accented English. Russian, maybe Eastern European. The target's not here, another responded. Intel said he'd come back. Then we wait, the first man said. Check the back. Could be hiding. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, trying to control his breathing. Think. What would Sarah do? Sarah would probably take them all down with her bare hands, he thought bitterly. But he wasn't Sarah. He was nobody, remember? A crash from the vitamin aisle made him flinch. They were destroying the store, looking for someone. But who? And why here? Sir, a new voice, younger, nervous. We've got movement. Parking lot. Through the pharmacy window, Marcus saw a figure stumbling across the parking lot. Even from a distance, he could see the dark stains on the man's clothes. Blood. A lot of it. The man made it to the door, practically falling through. He was older, maybe 60s, with silver hair and sharp features despite his obvious pain. His eyes swept the store and locked onto Marcus's position with startling intensity. "Please," the man gasped, clutching his side. "Help me." Every instinct told Marcus to hide, to stay down, to be the nobody his sister said he was. But his medical training kicked in, overriding his fear. The man was bleeding out. He'd be dead in minutes without help. Marcus made his choice. He vaulted over the pharmacy counter and rushed to the injured man, catching him as he collapsed. Up close, the wounds were worse than he'd thought. At least 2 gunshot wounds, possibly more. "Get down!" Marcus hissed, dragging the man behind a display of cough medicine. His hands moved automatically, applying pressure to the worst of the wounds. "What's your name?" "Who are those men?" The man's eyes fluttered, fighting to stay conscious. Colonel James Morrison. Those men, they can't. The drive. Stay with me, Colonel." Marcus grabbed supplies from the shelf, gauze, tape, antiseptic. Thank God for overnight pharmacy access. "I'm going to help you, but I need you to stay conscious." "Behind us." The shout came from too close. Marcus looked up to see one of the tactical team rounding the aisle, weapon raised. Time slowed. Marcus saw the gun barrel swing toward them, saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger. "This is how I die," he thought. "In a Walgreens," trying to save a stranger. But Colonel Morrison moved faster than any injured man should have been able to. His hand shot out, grabbing a can from the shelf and hurling it with deadly accuracy. It struck the gunman in the throat, sending him staggering back. "The break room!" Morrison gasped. "Get us to the break room! Now!" Marcus didn't argue. He hauled the colonel to his feet, supporting most of his weight as they stumbled toward the back of the store. Behind them, shouts erupted as the other men discovered their fallen comrade. They burst into the break room just as bullets shattered the door frame behind them. Marcus slammed the door, throwing the deadbolt. "That won't hold them long," Morrison said, leaning heavily against the wall. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "Listen to me. In my jacket. Inside pocket." Marcus found it. A small encrypted drive, slick with blood. That drive contains evidence, war crimes, arms dealing, goes all the way to the top. Morrison's breathing was labored. "They'll kill anyone who's seen it. You need to—" The door shuddered as something heavy slammed into it. "Is there another way out?" Morrison asked. "Loading dock. Through that door." Marcus was already moving, supporting the colonel. "But they probably have someone covering it. We'll have to risk it." Morrison checked his sidearm. A Glock 19 that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "Can you shoot?" No, I'm pre-med, not military." Morrison almost smiled. "Today you're whatever you need to be to survive." They made it to the loading dock door before the break room door finally gave way. Marcus could hear boots thundering through the store. His hands shook as he entered the security code, praying Jerry hadn't changed it. The night air hit them like a slap. The loading dock was empty, but Marcus could see movement in the shadows. They'd never make it to his car. "There," Morrison pointed to a delivery truck, keys still in the ignition. "Move." They ran, or rather, Marcus ran while half-carrying Morrison. Bullets sparked off the concrete as they reached the truck. Marcus shoved Morrison into the passenger seat and dove behind the wheel. The engine roared to life. Marcus had never driven anything bigger than his beat-up Honda, but adrenaline was a hell of a teacher. He slammed the truck into gear and floored it, crashing through the security gate in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. "Left," Morrison shouted. "Get to the highway." Marcus yanked the wheel, tires screaming. In the mirrors, he could see SUVs peeling out of the parking lot in pursuit. This was insane. He was nobody, a failed medical student who couldn't even get into school. Now he was in a high-speed chase with armed mercenaries? "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, weaving through late-night traffic. "What have you gotten me into?" Morrison was fading, his responses slower. "Intelligence. Deep cover for 20 years. Finally got the evidence to bring them down. But they found out. Stay awake." Marcus reached over, shaking him. "We're almost to the hospital." "No hospitals. They'll be watching." Morrison's hand found Marcus's arm, grip surprisingly strong. "Brooklyn. Safe house. 427 Court Street, red door. Tell them Morrison sent you." "Tell who?" But Morrison's eyes had closed, his breathing shallow. Marcus cursed, pressing harder on the accelerator. The SUVs were gaining, and he was running out of options. Then he saw it, the entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge. An idea formed, crazy and desperate. He'd grown up in the city, knew every street, every shortcut. These men, whoever they were, probably relied on GPS. Marcus took the entrance at dangerous speed, then immediately cut across 3 lanes toward the first exit. Horns blared, brakes squealed, but he made it, shooting down into the maze of streets below the bridge. The SUVs, caught off guard, shot past the exit. He had minutes, maybe less. Marcus navigated the narrow streets of Dumbo, using every trick he'd learned from years of late-night delivery runs. Finally, he spotted it, 427 Court Street. A narrow brownstone with a faded red door. Morrison was unconscious now, pulse thready but present. Marcus half-carried, half-dragged him to the door and pounded on it. "Please, Morrison sent me, he's hurt." For a long moment, nothing. Then locks turned, multiple ones, and the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, alert despite the hour. Her eyes widened when she saw Morrison. Inside. Quickly. The interior was nondescript, but Marcus noticed things. Reinforced door frames, subtle cameras, windows with barely visible wire mesh. This was definitely a safe house. "Put him on the table," the woman ordered, already gathering medical supplies. "You're a doctor?" "Medical student. Almost." The words tasted bitter. "Then you'll do. Help me." For the next hour, Marcus worked beside the woman, who introduced herself only as Helen, fighting to save Morrison's life. It was the kind of emergency surgery they didn't teach in textbooks, performed on a kitchen table with limited supplies. But Marcus's hands were steady, his mind clear. This was what he was meant to do. Finally, Morrison was stable, unconscious, but breathing steadily. Helen stepped back, blood on her hands, and really looked at Marcus for the first time. "You did well," she said. "Most people would have frozen." "I'm nobody special," Marcus said automatically. "Just, nobody special doesn't do what you just did." Helen moved to a laptop on the counter, typing rapidly. "The drive. Do you have it?" Marcus handed it over, watching as she inserted it into the computer. Her face grew grim as she scrolled through files. "This is more than we hoped. Morrison did it." She looked up at Marcus. "Do you understand what you've stumbled into?" "Not really. He said something about war crimes, arms dealing, a network that goes back decades, private military contractors, corrupt officials, illegal weapons sales to terrorist organizations. Morrison spent 20 years undercover gathering this evidence. They've killed dozens to keep it secret." Marcus felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. "So what happens now?" "Now we get this to the right people. But first we need to keep you alive." Helen studied him. "They saw your face. They'll have your identity within hours. You can't go home." Home. His cramped apartment, his textbooks, his ordinary life, it all seemed very far away now. "What about my family, my sister?" "We'll handle it. For now, you stay here." Helen paused. "Your sister. Would that be Captain Sarah Chen, Fort Hamilton?" Marcus blinked. "How did you—" "We know all about your family. Mr. Chen. More than you might think." Helen's expression was unreadable. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, everything changes." Marcus found himself in a small upstairs room, mind racing. Through the window, he could see the first hints of dawn painting the Brooklyn sky. Somewhere out there, armed men were hunting him. His old life was effectively over, but strangest of all, he didn't feel afraid. For the first time in years, he felt purposeful. He'd saved a life tonight, faced down killers, made impossible decisions under pressure. Maybe Sarah was wrong. Maybe he wasn't nobody after all. His phone, miraculously still in his pocket, buzzed with texts. 17 missed calls from his supervisor, 3 from Sarah. He turned it off without reading them. Helen was right. Tomorrow, everything would change. Colonel Morrison's words echoed in his mind. "Today, you're whatever you need to be to survive." Marcus Chen, failed medical student and pharmacy stalker, closed his eyes and wondered who he would need to be tomorrow. Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee brewing somewhere below. For a moment, he lay still, disoriented, before the events of the night came rushing back. The pharmacy, the gunman, Colonel Morrison bleeding out on a kitchen table. He sat up quickly, noting he was still in yesterday's blood-stained clothes. His phone, turned off since last night, felt like a lead weight in his pocket. How long before someone reported him missing? How long before Sarah started using her military connections to track him down? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Chen, you're needed downstairs. Marcus found Helen in the kitchen, looking remarkably composed for someone who'd performed emergency surgery at 4 in the morning. Colonel Morrison was gone, the table cleaned, no sign of the chaos from hours before. Where is he? Marcus asked. Moved to a proper medical facility. One of ours. Helen poured him coffee without asking. He's stable, thanks to you. Asking for you, actually. He's conscious? Intermittently. But before we go see him, we need to discuss your situation. Helen gestured to a chair. Sit. Eat something. You're going to need your strength. She placed a file on the table between them. Marcus's military ID photo stared back at him, but it wasn't his. The face was his, but the name read, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, Army Medical Corps. What is this? Your new identity. Temporary, but it'll hold up under scrutiny. Helen sipped her coffee calmly. As of 6 hours ago, you've been retroactively enlisted and commissioned. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You've been serving in a classified medical unit for the past 2 years. That's impossible. I never enlisted. I failed the medical boards. I'm nobody. Stop. Helen's voice cut through his spiral. First rule, forget everything your sister ever told you about yourself. Second rule, the person who saved Morrison's life last night wasn't nobody. He was someone who kept his head under fire, performed field surgery with minimal supplies, and outmaneuvered trained killers. That's who you are now. Marcus stared at the ID. Why are you doing this? Because Morrison vouched for you with his life. Because we need someone with medical training who isn't already on their radar. And because... Helen pulled out another file. We've been watching your family for some time. The file was thick, full of surveillance photos and reports. Sarah in her uniform, their parents at their restaurant, and Marcus, entering the Columbia University Library, leaving Mount Sinai after another failed interview, working his overnight shifts. My family? Why? Not your family specifically. Your sister's commander, Brigadier General David Carlson. Helen found a photo, a stern-faced man in his 50s with silver eagles on his shoulders. He's been under investigation for 18 months, suspected ties to the same network Morrison infiltrated. Marcus felt cold despite the hot coffee. You think Sarah's commander is involved with arms dealers? We know he is. What we don't know is how deep it goes, or who else in his command might be compromised. Helen leaned forward. Your sister has been his aide-de-camp for 8 months. She's either involved or in danger. Possibly both. No, Marcus shook his head. Sarah's many things, but she's not a traitor. She's so by the book it's painful. Which might be why Carlson keeps her close. The perfect cover. Helen closed the file. But that's a problem for later. Right now, we need to get you to Morrison. He insisted on briefing you personally. The medical facility was hidden in plain sight, a veterinary clinic in Brooklyn that served actual pets by day and something else entirely by night. Marcus followed Helen through a hidden door behind the X-ray machine, downstairs that shouldn't exist according to the building's blueprints. Morrison was awake, propped up in a hospital bed, looking far better than any man with multiple gunshot wounds had a right to. His eyes sharpened when he saw Marcus. The hero of the hour, Morrison said, voice rough but amused. Come to check your handiwork? Marcus moved automatically to check the monitors, examine the dressings. Everything was professional grade, better than some hospitals he'd worked in. You heal fast for an old man. Morrison laughed, then winced. Old man? I'll remember that when I'm signing your commendation. He grew serious. Helen told you about Carlson? She said he's connected to your investigation. Connected? Morrison's expression darkened. He's the linchpin. 20 years I've been tracking this network. Every time we got close, someone tipped them off. Took me 15 years to realize the leak was coming from inside. Another 5 to trace it to Carlson. But he's a general. How does someone like that start small? A favor here, some intelligence there. Then they have leverage and it grows. Morrison shifted carefully. The drive you saved? It has communications between Carlson and Viktor Volkov, a Russian arms dealer who's been supplying weapons to terrorist cells across 3 continents. Dates, transactions, even recordings of Carlson providing classified troop movements to keep shipments safe. Marcus sank into a chair. His sister worked directly for a traitor. Does Sarah know? That's what we need to find out, and you're uniquely positioned to help us. Me? I'm nobody. Marcus caught himself, remembering Helen's words. I mean, I'm not trained for this. You're her brother. You have access she'd never give anyone else. Morrison studied him. More importantly, after last night, Volkov's people know someone helped me escape. They'll be looking for connections, vulnerabilities. Your sister is both. You want me to spy on my own sister? I want you to protect her. Morrison's voice was firm. If she's innocent, she's in danger. If she's involved, she needs to be stopped before it destroys her. Either way, doing nothing isn't an option. Marcus thought of Sarah in her perfect uniform, her voice dripping disdain. You're a nobody, and you always will be. But also Sarah at 8 years old, splitting her Halloween candy with him, even though he'd been too sick to trick or treat. Sarah taking the blame when he broke Mom's favorite vase. Sarah before the army, before the distance, before she decided he was a disappointment. What would I have to do? Morrison smiled grimly. First, you need to become the soldier your new ID says you are. Then, you need to get close to Carlson. Lucky for you, there's a medical conference at Fort Hamilton next week. Military trauma surgery, latest techniques from the field. Your new unit will be presenting. I don't have a unit. You do now. Morrison handed him another file. The 558th Medical Detachment. Classified unit that provides emergency medical support for special operations. Your commanding officer is Major Elizabeth Torres. She's one of ours. Marcus flipped through the file. Photos of soldiers he'd never met. Missions he'd never been on. A whole life fabricated in hours. This is insane. This is necessary. Morrison leaned back, exhaustion showing. Helen will get you up to speed. You have 5 days to become Lieutenant Chen. Don't waste them. The next 5 days were a blur. Helen's brownstone turned out to be more than a safe house. It was a training facility. Marcus found himself in an intensive crash course that made medical school look like kindergarten. Major Torres arrived the second day, a compact woman with sharp eyes and no patience for excuses. I don't care what you were before, she announced. You're mine now, and my people don't fail. She drilled him relentlessly. Military protocol, field medicine, combat basics, how to walk like a soldier, talk like an officer, think like someone who'd seen action. Marcus's hands blistered from weapons training. His body ached from PT. His mind reeled from the sheer volume of information. You're favoring your right side, Torres barked during hand-to-hand training. In the field, that tells the enemy exactly where to hit you. Marcus adjusted, blocking her strike and countering with one of his own. She nodded approvingly. Better. You might survive this after all. Evenings were spent with Helen, reviewing intelligence on Carlson's operation. The general was careful, paranoid even, but everyone had patterns, weaknesses. He keeps a second office, Helen explained, pointing to surveillance photos. Off base, registered under a shell company. He goes there every Thursday evening, always alone. That's where he meets his contacts? We think so, but we've never been able to get inside. Too much security, too many warnings. Helen smiled thinly. But next week, he'll be distracted by the conference, and by the unexpected appearance of Captain Chen's underachieving brother, suddenly returned as a war hero. Marcus looked at his reflection in the window. Already he looked different, leaner, harder, carrying himself with a confidence that wasn't quite natural yet, but was getting there. What's my cover story? Sarah knows I never enlisted. Family estrangement. You enlisted secretly after your last rejection from medical school, too proud to tell anyone you'd given up on your dream. The classified nature of your unit meant you couldn't reach out even if you wanted to. Helen handed him a tablet full of mission reports. Memorize these. Every detail. Your life depends on being believable. On the 4th night, Marcus's phone finally died. He'd kept it off, but the battery gave out. Helen provided a new one, military issue, with a carefully curated history of calls and texts. Marcus hesitated. Can I check my messages? From before? Helen considered, then nodded. Supervised, and you can't respond. Marcus powered on his old phone one last time. The messages flooded in. His supervisor, increasingly frantic about his disappearance. Friends wondering if he was okay. His parents, worried but trying not to show it. And Sarah. 17 missed calls. Dozens of texts, escalating from annoyed to concerned to genuinely frightened. Where are you? Marcus, this isn't funny. The pharmacy said there was an incident. Are you hurt? Please just let me know you're alive. Mom's going crazy. Dad won't say it, but he's scared too. I'm sorry about what I said. You're not nobody. Please come home. The last message was from that morning. I've reported you missing, using every connection I have to find you. Don't make me regret caring, little brother. Marcus stared at the screen until Helen gently took the phone away. She loves you, in her way. She has a funny way of showing it. Family's complicated, especially when you're trying to save them from themselves. Helen powered down the phone for the last time. Ready for tomorrow's field exercise? The field exercise turned out to be a test. Torres dropped him at a warehouse in Queens with basic medical supplies and a simple mission: treat casualties in a mass trauma scenario. What she didn't tell him was that the casualties would be real actors with disturbingly realistic wounds, that the scenario would include live fire, blanks, but Marcus didn't know that at first, and that he'd have to make life-or-death triage decisions under pressure. Marcus entered the warehouse to find chaos. Smoke filled the air, alarms blared, and victims screamed in pain. His training kicked in immediately. "You and you," he pointed to two less injured actors. "Help me move the critical cases. Everyone who can walk, get to that corner now." He worked systematically, the fake blood and prosthetic wounds gruesome enough to trigger real adrenaline. Tourniquet here, pressure bandage there, airway management for the unconscious victim in the corner. Then the enemy attacked. Figures in black tactical gear stormed in, firing blanks that sounded terrifyingly real in the enclosed space. Marcus threw himself over a patient, shielding them while still working to stop their bleeding. "Medic down!" someone screamed. Marcus looked up to see another medical trainee on the ground, playing dead. Now he had double the casualties and half the help, just like the pharmacy, the voice in his head whispered. Except this time, you're ready. He organized the walking wounded into a defensive position, using overturned tables as cover while he worked. When one of the attackers got too close, Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed a metal tray and swung it like a weapon, dropping the surprised actor. "Scene secure," Torres's voice came over the intercom 40 minutes later. "Exercise complete." Marcus looked around at the warehouse-turned-battlefield. Every casualty had been triaged, treated, and evacuated to the safe zone. He'd lost 2, both programmed to be unsavable, but saved 8 under combat conditions. Torres appeared, no longer the harsh taskmaster, but genuinely impressed. Most real combat medics would have lost 4 or 5 in that scenario. "You sure you've never done this before?" "I had a good teacher," Marcus said, exhausted but oddly exhilarated. "No," Torres corrected. "You had good instincts. I just showed you how to use them." The night before the conference, Marcus stood in front of a mirror in tactical medical gear, barely recognizing himself. The soft, uncertain man who'd sat in that pharmacy 5 days ago was gone. In his place stood Lieutenant Marcus Chen, 558th Medical Detachment, with a chest full of ribbons he'd earned in missions he'd memorized but never lived. Helen made final adjustments to his uniform. "Remember, confidence is key. You belong there. You've earned your place through blood and sacrifice. Fake blood and fake sacrifice. The mindset is what matters. And Marcus?" Helen met his eyes in the mirror. "What you did for Morrison was real. What you're about to do for your sister is real. Never forget that." Morrison called that evening, sounding stronger. "You ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as 5 days of training can make me. You'd be surprised. I've seen 20-year veterans who couldn't do what you did in that pharmacy." Morrison paused. "Your sister's going to be shocked when she sees you." Marcus thought of Sarah's messages, the desperation creeping into her usual controlled tone. "That's the plan, right? Shock her into making a mistake? Shock her into letting you help her," Morrison corrected. "Whatever else she is, she's still your sister. Remember that when things get complicated. And Chen, they will get complicated." That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about the moment he'd face Sarah. Would she see through his deception immediately? Would she be angry, relieved, suspicious? He'd spent years being the disappointment, the nobody, the failure. Tomorrow, he'd be something else entirely. His new phone buzzed. A message from Torres. "Transport picks you up at 0600. Don't be late. And Chen, make us proud." Marcus closed his eyes, running through his cover story one more time. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, combat medic, hero of classified operations. Everything his sister said he could never be. Tomorrow, he'd find out if he could pull off the performance of his lifetime. Tomorrow, he'd walk into Fort Hamilton and face down not just his sister, but her commander, a traitor whose secrets could get them all killed. "You're a nobody, and you always will be." "We'll see about that, Sarah," Marcus thought. "We'll see."